Okay, folks, while we are out here and the horses are napping, I wanted to answer a few questions that I get from time to time in private messenger. I get the question a lot where people are telling me that they have never had horses and they want to get into horses, or they want to get themselves a horse at some point, and they want to know what the basic necessities are for a horse. Okay, so great question. If you are wanting to get a horse, first thing you need to remember is that horses are herd animals. Okay, they thrive when they are in a herd. So lots of times you'll pass by this one lone horse out in a field and the poor animal just looks miserable. That is not something that I would recommend that you do. If you have any way possible of putting that horse into a herd type of situation, whether that is through a boarding facility or maybe getting them a companion, or, I mean, a companion could even be like a goat, or a dog or a llama, something like that. But they are definitely herd animals. So that is one thing you want to really consider. It's not like a dog where you take it into your home and it becomes part of your pack. Your horse basically lives out in a field and is by itself. They are prey animals, which means they are much more likely to live in fear, because a horse acts upon two impulses, fight or flight. And because they are prey animals, and because a horse would be by itself in a field, that most likely would mean it would be flight. So definitely keep that in mind if you're looking to get a horse. Remember that they do absolutely need companionship. Also remember that they are prey animals. So that brings me to point number 2. You have to have a very safe environment for your horse. Okay, that means fencing. And this farm that I'm on right now happened to have this old fencing up, but along the street out there, I actually have electric fencing about a foot in off of the street, because I just don't trust that old dilapidated fence over there. Plus, it keeps people out, like from reaching in over the fence, because I get people all the time walking up and down that road that want to, feed the horses or do something with the horses, touch the horses, pet the horses, and there's an electric fence there, and it just helps keep them a little bit safer. So your environment for your horse is very, very important. You have to have good, solid fencing. You also have to have a type of a shelter for your horse. You can see right now, it's a hot day. Two of my horses are black. They want to stand underneath this nice, cool run-in shed that we have for them. And the way this thing was originally built, it didn't have this extra addition on it. So it was built sun-facing, so in the summertime, even if they're standing in the back of the run-in shed, they can't get out of the heat. It wasn't really built very smartly, whoever built it originally, because they stand under it and the sun's just beating down on them. So what I did is I extended it out with these shade sails. And this is a great tip if you need cheap shade for your horses. That thing was like $40, okay? And you can get them in all shapes and sizes. You can even get them custom cut. You can get them on Amazon. It provides, you see that big square of shade that it provides. Now, I did not get a waterproof one, but they do make them waterproof. Water will come through this, but if you pitch it a certain way, it's not too bad. This one does drip down in the middle here, but it's really not that bad. If it got really horrible, I could always just dig a hole about 3 feet, in diameter, and I could put some gravel in there, and then I could cover it with dirt and just make a little French drain for it to drain down in. But it's really not that big of a deal. But you do need some sort of shelter for them to be able to get out of the heat, get out of the rain, get out of the snow, get out of the wind. What will make a horse very sick in the wintertime is not so much the cold. It is the wet cold, okay? When they're in the wet and they can't dry off, and it's just pounding rain, and they're sitting there and they can't get their bodies warm again because they can't get out of the rain, then the wind is whipping. That's what will make a horse begin to shiver. And they'll start shaking so bad to warm themselves up, and that's where forage comes in, because if they've got access to forage, they can eat that forage and it can actually warm them up. It'll warm their bodies. But still, it's no replacement for shelter. You should always have some type of shelter for your horses. I mean, I know that it's not the law. Around here, you don't even have to have shelter for them, but I think that is very cruel and inhumane, and a horse should always be able to get into some shade, get out of the elements, just like you would want to get out of the elements yourself. You know, they do too. So you definitely need, like I said, know that they're a herd animal, know that they're fight or flight, know that they're prey animals, provide them with a good fenced-in, safe location, and then provide them with some type of a shelter. Provide them with ongoing forage. Horses need to forage 16 to 18 hours per day. If you do not have enough grass in your pastures, then you better be supplementing with hay. So that is something to remember. If you don't supplement with hay and they don't have enough pasture, you're going to have sick horses. They're going to colic, and a lot of colics are fatal. They end in fatalities. So you always want to have forage. And no, I do not normally just pile my hay on the ground like this. The only reason I did this was because this was a really loose bale, and it was falling apart anyway, and they're going to have this gone by tomorrow. So, and it's not going to rain tonight. So I'm not worried about it getting wet. I'm not worried about it getting, you know, messed up. These three will eat this thing down, you know, overnight. So I don't typically do that. Typically I will put my hay up in something like that where they can, you know, it's off the ground, they can eat out of it. But for this time of year, when I know I'm not expecting rain, I'll just spread a couple of bales around and let them go forage for it. Okay, so forage is the next thing. The next component you want to have is acreage. Okay, so they say that each horse that you have should have a minimum of 2 acres. And that is because they will graze on 1 acre while you allow the 2nd acre to rest. Okay, you have to be able to allow your fields to rest, or you're not going to have any hay or any grass left. So they say minimum of 2 acres per horse. So that is something to keep in mind. Now I am on 4 acres here with 3 horses, but I will say that I have a way of rotating my pastures. So I will put them on 1 pasture and I'll close off all 3 other pastures for, you know, I'll do it in a week, you know, on a weekly schedule. So while they're on that one, I will put them on the next one that I've rested the longest amount of time, that's been resting for 3 weeks. And then by the time they roll back around to that one again, you know, it will be another 3 weeks. So I rotate 4 pastures, you know, on 1 week intervals, and then I can keep them, I can manage the pastures pretty well, even though I do have under the acreage that is supposedly required. But you have to remember, I also supplement with grain each day, and their supplements, and this time of year I'm giving them hay. So just watch your acreage, and if you have the ability to rotate pasture and do it properly, then you don't need quite as many acres, but minimum of 1 acre per horse. That would be the bare minimum I would recommend. And you can always divide your pastures off. Like that big pasture down there, I could turn that into 3 pastures and let them pick on it for, you know, 2-3 days, 2-3 days, 2-3 days. And all the while, my other 3 pastures are growing up completely. I could do the same thing with this one. I could section off that whole corner there, and I could make that 1 pasture. I could make that another pasture. So it's just, you have to get creative in how you do things with your horses. But as long as you drag your fields and you maintain your land, you can keep up with it pretty well. It is a lot of work. I'm not going to say it's not. Next thing you always need is access to fresh, clean water, folks. Horses can drink anywhere from, 10 to 20 gallons of water per day. That is a 24-hour period. So on the really, really hot days, my horses standing there in these summer days that were 95 degrees, they can drink up to 60, 70 gallons of water per day. That is only a 100-gallon trough right there. So you can imagine, if I didn't come out here every day to check that trough, then in 2 days, the water in that trough would be gone, and they'd be standing here with nothing to drink. That little blue one is a 50-gallon tank, and that is a 100-gallon tank. Now, usually in the heat of the summer, I've got several tanks. I've got a tank down there. I've got a tank up here. I put another tank out there, just so that they've always got access to water whenever they want it. Ideally, if you have a freshwater creek or spring, you know, or pond that you can pull good water from, then that is, you're golden then, as long as the water is of good quality. I mean, I would have it tested, obviously. But if you can do that, then it makes your life so much easier. So, yeah, so those are the main things that if you are looking into getting into horses, that's what you're going to need. You're just going to need the possibility of a companion. Make sure that you understand that you have to have a safe environment. You have to have your fencing all intact, and that could include permanent structures as well as electric fencing. You've got to have enough pasture for your horses. You've got to have enough forage for your horses. And you certainly have to always have fresh, clean water for your horses. So it's a lot, guys. I'm not going to tell you it's not, but they are so worth it. They are wonderful, wonderful creatures, and just super, super wicked intelligent. But just remember that they do have brains, they have intelligence, they have feelings, and you can't just get a horse and throw it in the yard and never, ever, ever interact with it, never check on it. I would say the last thing I would add to that is you need to have a plan for fly control in the summertime, and you also need to have good veterinary care. So, you know, Shakespeare right now, he looks like he's going to Halloween because he's got his fly mask on, he's got his fly ointment on his face, he's got fly ointment on his legs. So that's all part of it. If you're going to get them, you better take care of them. You know, don't just let them stand in the backyard, starve to death, thirsty, and with flies eating them alive. So, you know, get a good vet, get them on a deworming program, take good care of them. They are your 1,000% responsibility. And remember, folks, horses can live up to 30, 40 years. Now, a lot of them will pass in their 20s, but I know a horse right now who's 36 years old, and it is a lifelong commitment. So just keep that in mind. All right, happy trails out there.